All right, today we're going to build South African law right from the ground up. We're zeroing in on two of its most essential pillars, the law of property and the law of obligations. And here's the key thing. We're going to see how every single rule, every concept, is shaped and guided by the supreme law of the land, the Constitution.
So how are we going to tackle this? Well, first, we'll lay the groundwork with the constitutional framework that governs everything. Then we're going to ask a really fundamental question. What's the actual difference between rights you have over things versus rights you have against people? From there, we'll dive into what ownership truly means, and you'll see pretty quickly that it isn't absolute. And to wrap it all up, we'll break down the 5 essential ingredients that turn a simple promise into a legally binding contract.
First things first, you have to understand the hierarchy. In South Africa, the Constitution is the absolute boss. It's the ultimate authority. Every other source of law, it doesn't matter if it's Roman Dutch, English, or African customary law, has to fall in line with it. And if any rule clashes with the Constitution, boom, it's invalid. That single principle is the bedrock for everything else we're about to discuss.
Now, this leads us to this really powerful idea called transformative constitutionalism. The best way to think about it is this. The law isn't just a dusty old set of rules sitting on a shelf. As Professor Carl Clare puts it, it's an active project. It's a tool that's meant to transform society, to heal the deep injustices of the past, and to actively build a fairer, more equal country for the future.
And if you want to know what that transformation is all about, you just have to look at the Constitution's preamble. Think of this as its mission statement. These 4 aims are the guiding star for every judge, every lawyer, every lawmaker. This is the why behind the law, and it shapes how every single rule we're about to get into is understood and applied.
Okay, so with that massive foundation in place, let's look at one of the most fundamental distinctions in all of law. I mean, getting your head around the difference between a right you have over a thing versus a right you have against a person is just absolutely crucial.
So on one hand, you've got what's called a real right. The word real actually comes from the Latin word res, which means thing. This is a powerful right you have over a specific object, your car, your house, and this is the kicker, you can enforce it against the entire world. On the other hand, you have a personal right. This right isn't over a thing. It's a right to claim something from a specific person, usually because of an agreement between you two. You can only enforce it against that person.
And this example just makes it crystal clear. Sifo owns the car. That's a real right. It doesn't matter who steals it or where it ends up, he can use his right of ownership to get it back from anyone. Now Zanile, who's leasing the car, she has a personal right, but only against Sifo. If he breaks the lease, she can sue him, but she can't enforce her right to use the car against the thief. See the difference?
So let's zoom in on the biggest, most powerful real right of them all, ownership. I mean, it's the most complete right you can possibly have over a thing. But how does it actually work? And maybe more importantly, how does it move from one person to another?
Let's start with the golden rule of property law. It's a Latin principle called Nemo plus Iuris, and it's actually really simple, but so profound. You cannot give what you do not have. If you don't actually own something, you can't legally make someone else the owner. This is the fundamental rule that means a thief can never, ever give a buyer good legal ownership of your stuff.
But here's the thing, just handing something over to someone isn't enough to make them the new owner. There has to be a valid legal reason for the transfer, something the law calls the justa causa. This is the just cause, the underlying agreement that makes the transfer legit. A contract of sale? Perfect example. A donation? Yep, that works too. But a lease agreement? Nope, because with a lease, the whole point is that ownership is not supposed to pass. Okay, so you've got a valid reason. Now you need what the law calls delivery, or traditio. And the law is smart about this. It recognizes it can happen in a few different ways. The most obvious is just simple hand-to-hand delivery. But what about something you can't just hand over, like a herd of cattle? The law allows for delivery with the long hand. You just point them out. Then things get a bit more abstract. You've got brevi manu, which is for when the buyer already has the item, and its opposite, constitutum possessorium, where the seller hangs onto the item after the sale, maybe leasing it back. And finally, you have symbolic delivery, like handing over the keys to a car or the title deed to a house.
So we've established that ownership is a really powerful right. But, and this is a huge but, it is not absolute. This is where we see that mission of transformative constitutionalism we talked about earlier really kick into high gear, as the Constitution steps in to balance the rights of owners with the needs of society as a whole.
And that brings us to Section 25, the famous property clause. You have to see this as a massive balancing act. On one side, it protects property owners from having their property just taken away arbitrarily.
But on the other side, it explicitly gives the state the power to expropriate property for a public purpose and, so crucially, to push forward with land reform to fix the legacy of past discrimination.
And working right alongside that is Section 26, which creates a right of access to adequate housing. This is huge. It states that no one can be evicted from their home without a court order, and that court must consider all the relevant circumstances first. This puts a direct constitutional brake on the raw power of a property owner.
Now, the law that puts Section 26 into everyday practice is called the PI Act. That's the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act, and it forces a court to look way beyond simple ownership papers. Before a judge can grant an eviction, they have to weigh all these factors you see here: how vulnerable the people are, how long they've lived there, if there's anywhere else for them to go, and ultimately decide if eviction is truly just and equitable. You can imagine this creates a really profound and often difficult balancing act for the courts, weighing an owner's rights against an occupant's basic human dignity.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time in the world of things. Let's switch gears and move into the world of promises. What exactly does it take to turn a simple, everyday agreement into a legally binding contract that a court will actually enforce?
So for any agreement to be a real, valid contract, it's got to check 5 essential boxes. Number 1, was there a genuine meeting of the minds, or what the law calls consensus? 2, were both people legally capable of making the deal in the first place? 3, was the contract for a legal purpose? You can't have a valid contract to do something illegal. 4, was the thing they agreed to do actually possible? And finally, 5, were the terms clear enough? If you get a no on any one of these, the whole contract can fall apart.
Wow, okay, we've moved from the Constitution itself to the nature of rights, through the complexities of ownership, and into the rules for contracts. So what's the one thread, the big idea that ties all of these legal building blocks together in the South African context?
You know, I think this quote just says it perfectly. These rules about property and contracts, they aren't just dry, ancient principles. Not at all. They are part of a dynamic, living system that is constantly being shaped by the Constitution's grand mission to build a more just and more equitable society. The law isn't static. It's a reflection of a nation's journey, where it's been and where it's trying to go.